Alright, welcome. This is sort of an impromptu live stream. And just figured I'd try to get in the holiday spirit with some memories. I actually just wrapped my Christmas gifts while watching this. This is one of my holiday favorites. And kind of one of the first things that I've ever remember watching. So I thought that was fun. I enjoyed that. And now I'm going to go through some December video game magazines. And hopefully the sound is okay. Trying to pump a little music into the stream. Not exactly sure how the audio quality is. But we're going to start with Electronic Gaming Monthly. And Electronic Gaming Monthly, if you've been following the channel, that was my magazine growing up. I was always a huge fan, subscriber for a while, and I would always look forward to them coming in the mail. It was a big day, and of course, I mean, look at how thick this magazine was. So, I mean, as a kid, before the internet, this was my access to gaming. And I picked the December issues. Granted, yeah, they came out not really in December, but in November. Although they always were the Christmas issues for me because it was where I went to really sort of look at, well, hey, what do I want for Christmas? What should I ask my parents for? So, again, this big of a magazine, it was always an event. So let's go through this. I've got a couple different magazines for you here tonight. We'll see how long the stream can go. And I always just like to go through old magazines. I used to do this just to sort of standalone videos. And I actually think that, the magazines, to me, were such a big part of video gaming back in the day. So much nostalgia was wrapped up, or is wrapped up now, in just going through these old magazines. So this one's kind of beat up. See what they were advertising. The Super Game Boy. Super Game Boy. I did get Super Game Boy. I don't know if I got it. What issue is this? 93? 94? I may have gotten Super Game Boy near that time. Now, this is another thing that I really like about going through old magazines is you see a game, The Page Master. What is this game? Never heard of it. Never really played it. So, that kind of looks like a... I don't know what that is, actually. It looks like an Aladdin sort of game. Final Fantasy advertisement. That's a classic. Final Fantasy 3. Did not have... I don't know that I had a Super Nintendo when Final Fantasy 3 came out, so I probably got the Super Game Boy a little bit later. Video game accessories. And all these old controllers and Pro Pads. Don't know that I ever had any of these. Can't quite see the letters to the editor with my particular setup, so I'm going to skip over this. Look, Atlas doing a GP motorcycling game. Interesting. Michael Andretti's IndyCar. So I've said that racing is a genre that has gotten so much better these days. I mean, those games were hideous. PGA Pro. 3DO. This probably, if this was 94, this would have been the second year that the 3DO was out. So, probably the bloom was coming off the rose, as it were. But, yeah, the 3DO looked cool, especially Super Street Fighter 2. That was awesome. Alright, reviews. Game of the month was, let's see, Sonic and Knuckles. Game of the month. And that, that I remember, I didn't have that. A friend got it around this Christmas, and it definitely looked awesome. I didn't ask for it. It's actually be interesting to see what I actually got for Christmas '94, because I don't remember, but I'm sure this magazine will kind of refresh those memories. Yeah, let's see. As I would say, it's worth a 10. It was kind of more of the same with Sonic 3, but you could connect the carts. Another advertisement for the 3DO. Neighbor actually had a 3DO. I played a little bit of it. What other games were reviewed? We can get that in the shot. Balls. I actually rented that. Oh, Pagemaster. Let's see here. I think I can kind of read this. Pagemaster was another movie-to-game conversion coming to the Super NES. At least Fox took the time to create a game that was fun to play. The Pagemaster has all the right elements of a decent action title. Brilliant graphics, good tunes, and lots of interaction with enemies and backgrounds. Alas, the control of our hero feels as if he's wearing roller skates at an ice rink. It's a decent game for the kiddies to chill out on. Fair enough. What else? Zero the Kamikaze. I do not remember that. Echo Tides of Time. Rental for me. The Tick was a rental. Now, these Madden games, of course, I did pick up NHL 95, albeit before Christmas. Had a blast with that. Lunar. Look at that. Advertisement for Lunar. What a terrific game. Even the Sega CD version, to me, holds up after all these years. Tank, Flashback. A lot of working design stuff here. Contra the Alien Wars for the Game Boy. And Dragon's Lair 2. Interesting. Advertisement for Pitfall. A Blockbuster and with typical 90s attitude. Babbage's Software top 10s. Let's see. Wily Country Club for the 3DO. Final Fantasy III, I could definitely see that. Mortal Kombat 2, Legion of Gaia, Power Rangers for the Super NES was top of the Genesis. Yeah, NHL 95 was a great game. A lot of people have the nostalgia for NHL 94. But I always thought NHL 95, it had better control. It was a little bit faster, had a little bit bigger sprites. To me, that was, the defining game in that stretch. College football's national championships. A lot of sports games was out for the Sega CD. Heart of the Alien. I do not remember that. Game Gear, Mortal Kombat 2. Interesting. What we have here. I guess these were all the Panasonic 3DO games. Sega Saturn launching in Japan. Now this was something that I spent a fair amount of time drooling over back in the day. Of course, obviously Sega botched the launch over here, but of course when you were reading about the Saturn, it was exciting. And of course, the Saturn has since become one of my favorite systems. Let's see what else we have in this issue. The Game Saver. Naki to Unleash 3DO controllers. It's funny, I believe I actually have that. And I didn't do it so much for the game saving, but rather because you can play imports. This was one of the first ways that I played imports on the Super Famicom. Sega commercials. heck is this? Animaniacs. Wow, look at that ad. So these were all the cartoons. And they each had their own game. The Batman and Robin game was pretty good, if I remember. Sparkster. Advertisement for a pocket organizer. I guess the 3DO controller was not considered optimal for these. You can see that for the Super Street Fighter. So you can hook up a Super Nintendo controller. It's a good idea. Sony PlayStation Japan debut. So right, you know, it's funny. 1994. It seems like, for me anyway, such a ways off from that, you know, jump to the next generation. But yeah, interesting. Like, to me, that's, I started high school in '96, and that was, you know, to me, you know, those systems were high school systems. '94, I was still very much in the 16-bit era. Brazilian Air Force, FIFA Soccer. So this is, I think, the second year of FIFA. Armored Warriors by Capcom. This, I think, eventually came out on the Saturn. And very good game, actually. I picked it up not too long ago. It can... Robotrek. Square Enix RPG. Now, this is a game that I have never heard of, and I don't recall seeing any reviews on this. So this is something I think worth searching out or emulating. Super Bomberman. Bomberman 2, good game. Banpresto Japan, Go-Go Ackman. Yeah, Go-Go Ackman was a good one. Malajun Guru, an RPG. Wonder Project. Wagyan Paradise. Don't recall those ones. Oh, Gomon 3, one of my favorites. Gamera Gaios Extermination Plan. Interesting. Oh, we got Super Fire Pro, All Japan Pro Wrestling 2 and 3. I actually preferred this one. Record of Lotus War. It's the Super CD-ROM. Also, we have Battle Pinball, Battle Racers, and the magazine is coming apart here. What am I missing? Like some Dragon Ball Z stuff. Well, so much for that. King of the Fighters 94. And I remember, I don't know, that game, somehow I have a memory of seeing that somewhere, although I guess it was just in the arcade, so I didn't know anyone that had a Neo Geo. I'm still not seeing any games that I picked up, although I would say that you know, I had Mortal Kombat 2, and that was definitely a game that I sort of remember playing over the holidays, but I probably got that a little bit earlier. Shaq Fu. Oh, Super Brawl Wrestling. I really wanted to play this. Then I did, and it was terrible. F1 Rock. Not seeing a ton of stuff. Now, Quarterback Club, I kind of remember picking. Well, no, I think I rented Quarterback Club. Wasn't as good as Madden. Mickey Mania, I did have that. And yeah, definitely memories of this game, though I didn't have 3DO. But this was one that I think it was the only game that my neighbor had, and you know, put some time into it. It was really, really impressive for its time, but that system wasn't worth $700. Rise of the Robots, Mega Man X2, great game. Wolverine, I think this was a rental. Man, I'm not seeing any of the games that I got this year. Street Hockey, that's funny. Street Hockey was actually kind of a big deal. Of course, I didn't know how to skate, so that was out of the question. Nobunaga's Ambition. Now, that is a series that has been going on forever, and yet I have never played it and don't know that I want to. That and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Seven Kingdoms, something like that. Frankenstein. Software, etc. Let's see. I actually want to say I had Clay Fighter around the holidays of 94. Mortal Kombat 2, definitely. So if you just joined us, let me know how the audio is. I don't know if the music is too loud, not loud enough. Street Fighter movie review. That looked dreadful. Sega Man of Alcatraz. What is this? EGM invades Sega. Tom Kalinske, quote, "We will introduce the freestanding unit that has a combined Genesis and 32X under $200 next year." It's probably less than it's going for now. Rystar. Wasn't a fan of this. I know it was made by the Sonic team, but I just never got into it. Although, maybe I only played the Game Gear version. So if anyone wants to come into chat and talk about their memories of any of these games as we go through some old video game magazines. And, you know, EGM, I remember poring over EGM, and yet I don't see any games here in the December 94 issue that I actually picked up. Phantasy Star 4 was a rental, which of course I couldn't get through in one weekend, and then I subsequently bought it many years later. Eternal Champions, kind of a Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat ripoff. Now Now this looks familiar. NFL 95. This I may have gotten this in 94. And I love the, see this here, the zoom feature where the game would kind of zoom in after a completion when you had possession. I thought that was the coolest bit of graphical manipulation back then on the Genesis. Sonic Triple Trouble. I actually played this relatively recently. It's a pretty good game. I have a soft spot for the Sonic Game Gear games. I had a number of them. I'll talk about it in my Game Gear episode. X-Men The Clone Wars. Don't remember that. Cosmic Carnage on the 32X. Now, Mickey Mania. I want to say that I definitely have it on the Sega CD. Very difficult game. And I don't know if I had it on the Genesis as well. Alright, so this was obviously a huge special feature. The whole sort of write-up on Final Fantasy III. Great game. Obviously, again, this is a game that I played much, much later because I didn't have an SNES at this point. But I remember, looking at this map and just, what a big world that game had. And in the days before, playthroughs and the internet, this was all you had. So you would sort of pore over this and imagine what this game could be. Now this is interesting. This is something that I had, and I still have these somewhere. These Fleer Ultra X-Men cards. Recently I found them. Wonder what I did with them. But yeah, these were very cool. Of course, X-Men the animated series was big at this time, and yeah, for whatever reason, I went to a comic book shop. Never forget, this was on the side of a highway next to a Chevrolet dealership. And I don't know, I was waiting for my parents to pick me up or waiting for them to get done with something. And I sort of walked across the highway, past the Chevy dealership, and went in there and I bought, I want to say that they had a box set of these. And I bought the box set. I think I looked it up and they were worthless today, but it's a good memory. These X-Men games always look cool, but they were not great side-scrollers, really. Beavis and Butthead. So we have the sports games. Chris Berman on the cover of ESPN Sunday Night Football. Very bad game. That was a rental. Although I missed the days when there were about, I don't know, 5, 6 different NFL games. ESPN hockey, but the ESPN games were not good. ESPN Speed World, ugh, awful. Super Punch-Out, a game that I definitely had many years later. Absolute classic. To me, I obviously have nostalgia for the original Punch-Out, but this was my favorite game. Still haven't played the one on the Wii. To look at that. Chavez 2. Interesting. And Hammerlock Wrestling. A game that I really wanted to play, never did. Played it probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not a great wrestling game, just kind of jumping from cutscene to cutscene. Oh, X-Band. X-Band, I remember that being a big deal. First online gaming. And I don't know that I knew anyone who had it, but I remember my parents were considering it because they figured if I could just download the games, they wouldn't have to buy me any more games, but I think the cable plan was way too expensive. Quarterback Club. This is a nostalgic picture. All the great NFL quarterbacks of the day. Top Gear 3000. These games were great. Unnecessary Roughness. Is that rugby? There was an EA Sports rugby game in '94. Interesting. Crazy Chase. Again, another one of those games that never heard of, and I haven't seen any YouTube videos about it. If anything, it gives me some ideas of what I want to seek out in emulation. Rap Jam. Oh my god. Some horrible games. Alright, NBA Jam, Sega CD. Definitely got this. Still have it. Fun game. Maybe that was a Christmas gift in '94. Release date December. Yeah, I want to say that finally this was definitely a Christmas gift. And it was cool to play at home. Of course, it wasn't as great as the Super NES version, so I was a little bit depressed when I played the Super NES version at a friend's house. This was more or less the Genesis version with good music, although it was a very good soundtrack. What do we have here? Slam City with Scottie Pippen. Oh my god. Awful. FIFA Soccer on the 3DO. Oh, looks like it was a pseudo 3D game. It's pretty cool. That might have been the first truly 3D FIFA game. A CDI game with Dick Butkus. Walk through the Hall of Fame. One guy gave it a 90%, one guy gave it a 70%. That's funny. Death of Superman. I actually just found an unopened copy of that comic. I guess as a kid, I remember I guess I bought two. There's a really great comic book store in a mall about a half hour outside of New York City, and it was overwhelming. It was 2 stories, all comic books, and what we would call geek culture today. Yeah. I guess it never really appreciated in value, and I had the whole run of all these Death of Superman things. They were all destroyed except for the one where he's... Actually, it was the one where he comes back to life that was sealed. Jurassic Park. Interesting. It's a lot of ink dedicated to a very, very average game, if I remember correctly. What is this? Ninja Training Camp. Wolverine. Yeah, again, this was a rental. Didn't really care for it. Kirby's T-Shot. This had a different name. I really enjoy this game. Of course, I'm blanking on what the name was, but good game. Actually one of my favorite Super NES games. I actually have it right in the closet. What is it called? That's it. Kirby's Dream Course. One of, I think, a fairly underrated Super Nintendo game. Very, very fun, very challenging. I've probably streamed it and or put it in one of my videos. The Shadow. Alec Baldwin's attempt to be a superhero. Didn't work out. Lufia. Interesting. Hagane. Now, again, this game went completely under the radar. And yet, now I think this is one of the most valuable Super Nintendo games around. It doesn't seem like my chat or viewer function is updating. Let's see something here. I wonder if I have to be logged in to get this to work. There's always a little something with a stream. These widgets working. Not that it matters, but I could have sworn that I had a whole streaming setup that would give me viewer count and chat. Oh well, not gonna worry about it. Sink or swim. I mean, just look at all these games. That's what I loved about this magazine. You know, 300 pages of just game after game. Aero the Acrobat. It's another rental. This is one of the nice things about living eventually, by this time, a bike ride, about a 10-minute bike ride from a Blockbuster. So it's just every weekend, 1 or 2 games. Oh, thank you, Pink Mike. Yeah, it was Kirby's Dream Course. I don't know why I was blanking on that. I was going to say I just found it the other day in the closet. Wastelands. Ugh, God. Shaq Fu. Sequest. This was a rental. I want to say that this television show, a lot of people thought it was going to be like the next Star Wars, and from what I recall, it was not. Power Instinct. Boy, this was not a great edition of this magazine as far as these games go. Aerobiz. It's funny, as a kid I was kind of interested in this, but yeah, I guess the chat's not showing up on screen. Viewer count's not showing up on screen. That's a shame. Crusader of Senti, or Crusade of Senti. And there's another game that, you know, if I had picked it up, and this was a rental, I did play this. Picked it up at Blockbuster, and why didn't I buy it? Bought so many Maddens, but not this. Alright, see if I can get this, I can get this going. I copy that, and then do a Control V. Oh well. So be it. What else do we have? Blackthorn. KO's Flying Squadron. Okay, so this magazine actually was cueing me into the fact that, oh, look at all these great games that I passed up. Games that could contribute to one's retirement funds. I see what's going on there. Screwing this up. Sorry about this for watching. I just need to reconfigure a couple things just out of obsessive compulsive disorder, because I could have sworn that I had set up everything in the stream a certain way in the event that I wanted to just quickly pick things up. So the viewer count thing is working. Now let's close out that chat thing that that I configured improperly. Return fire. Looks like a modes. Oh, this was on the 3DO. It's funny, the 3DO is a system that I have no particular interest in collecting for. Plus, I hear they're very unreliable. Sherlock Holmes. Yeah. Wow. Look at this. And still only one game that I definitively got during the Christmas of '94. Doom on the Jaguar. That wasn't bad. I played it either at a kiosk for a couple minutes. It was pretty cool. Rayman on the Jaguar. Okay. Dragon the Bruce Lee story. Good lord. Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy. Interesting. Star Trek Generations on the Game Boy. Remember seeing that movie in the theaters. Bored to tears. Tarzan. Definitely, well, I had a Game Boy at this time. Daffy Duck. X-Men on the Game Gear. Now, this I may have had. I knew I had an X-Men game on the Game Gear. Again, it was not particularly great. Echo the Tides of Time. And it looks like this will do it. Comic book roundup for this. Look at all the... As I like looking at the old pricing guides. Interesting. Megaplay, I did have a subscription to that. Don't have a December issue. Japan Video Games. Let's see what things we're going for here, or what they were offering. Mega Drive, Yu Yu Hakusho, Phantasy Star 4, Super Nintendo, PC Engine, Super Famicom. What was Patlabor on the Super Famicom? Now that's a game I'd like to look at. I'm a pretty big fan of Patlabor, actually. Didn't realize there was a game. Oh man, you could call and you could purchase the Japanese Saturn. I have a price on that. Interesting. Alright, we're going to move on to our next magazine. Let's see here. Alright, we're going to do Game Fan. This is one that I picked up much later. I didn't really purchase Game Fan actually back in the day. Let's see if we can get that other chat box fixed. Copy that and go to here. And we will paste. Alright, so this theoretically should work now. I'm going to move this over here. Oh, that's not going to matter. Alright. See what's going on in Game Fan. And this is December 93. Alright, so maybe more of some classic games in here. So, like that. Dragon's Lair. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. Definitely a game that looked very interesting to me, but wasn't very good, if I recall. Alright. Let's see what else we have. I kind of remember December of '93 being a big year, because it was that transition year. We were first getting the Jaguar, first getting the 3DO. Obviously, great game there. Mega Man 4. You know, I don't know that I've ever played a Mega Man game. Maybe I played the second Game Boy Mega Man. I shouldn't say that. I have played that, but beyond that, I didn't even realize that the Game Boy Mega Mans went up to a 4. Alright, let's see here. Art of Fighting. Spider-Man. Huh. For the Game Boy, this is... I have to zoom out a little bit here, put this up like that. I want to say someone actually got that for me last Christmas, an unopened copy of that. Didn't open it. I don't recall those games being particularly good. Now, Christmas of '93, I definitely got this for Christmas of '93, and I had a blast with Street Fighter Special Champions Edition on the Genesis. You know, you had this feeling finally came to the Sega, and I had been very jealous of friends who had it on the Super Nintendo. I think it was like a year or two earlier. So this was the launch year, I think, for the 3DO. And let's see here. Lunar. This magazine had such a nice layout. I mean, look at this. I'm kind of shocked that I didn't discover it. Maybe it wasn't for sale, because I would have definitely gravitated to something like this. Some comics. Addams Family. Toe Jam and Earl, Panic on Funkatron. Don't remember that one, although I really like the first Toe Jam and Earl. You know, that, Sonic the Hedgehog, and the Michael Jackson game, to me, that was like the early Genesis. And I always have fond memories of that. Speaking of the early Genesis, I've got something interesting to show. Hold on a minute. Parents were cleaning out their house, and they found this in a box. The original Genesis instruction manual from some Christmas long ago. I actually still have this. I wonder what I did with it. Actually, I think this might be in a box right next to me. Nope. Anyway, certainly nostalgic for me. And that. Limited warranty for the original Genesis. Alright. Eternal Champions. Man, they were pushing that game hard. That was awful. It's like another sort of Sega's, I guess, version of Mortal Kombat. Lunar. And again, look at the layout of this magazine. This was a rental for me, the original Lunar. Remember, I played through about half of it. And CD games are even a little bit more expensive to rent, so I didn't go back to it. Joe and Mac, another game that... did I have this? No, I had Chuck Rock. It was a sort of similar caveman side-scroller. But, yeah, I mean, even, you know, consider video game magazines today, such as they are, and I know there's not that many of them, but, I mean, these layouts are incredible. Virtua Racing. This was a game that I had. Had it on the Genesis. I believe it came out for the... They had a Genesis, they had a 32X version. I had the Genesis version, which was not, I mean, ultimately not that impressive. But back then, I thought it was fun. What do we have here? High Seas, something or other. Can't read that. Havoc. Do not remember that one. Soldiers of Fortune. This looks kind of interesting. It's like a top-down shooter. Pretty neat. See what else. Chester Cheetah. I wouldn't be surprised if that game was worth something. Let's see here. Change up our music. I'm not a fan. I mean, I like techno, I guess, but not a fan of Christmas techno. Lost Vikings. Is it a Lemmings sort of game? Joe and Mac. Vey. Oh, it's another one. I regret not playing this. Still haven't played it. Is anyone out there, any of the viewers, was Vey worth... well, it's probably extremely expensive, but is it worth searching out? Is it worth devoting time to? You know, it was funny, back in the day, as a Sega CD owner, I always thought, you know, these graphics, like, you know, this looks pretty primitive compared to what you could get on the Super Nintendo. On the other hand, now I do have a nostalgia for these kind of clean Sega Genesis graphics, like Shining Force, things like that. Cotton. It's another one that I'm sure is worth quite a bit of money, although this almost looks like 3D Sonic stages. This is worth playing. Or worth giving it a shot, anyway. Shining Force 2. All-time favorite, as was the original Shining Force. Again, a game that I think is frequently underrated. And I remember picking up a copy of Shining Force Shining Force 2 not all that long ago. Planet SNES, Mega Man X, so that was the definitely 93 game. Fan of Mega Man, but never have been good enough to really get into these games. I always, make it through 2 or 3 levels and then just never taken it further, with the exception of X4 on the PlayStation. And I mean, if this doesn't make you want to play these games, just the layouts here. Super Battle Tank. Interesting. Fatal Fury 2. This was a Super Nintendo game? Yeah, I have to say I'm a fan of Fatal Fury. Although I don't recall playing any of the SNK games, with the exception of Samurai Showdown on the 16-bit hardware, and that wasn't great. So, I guess his Fatal Fury for the SNES wasn't great either. Alright, Lawnmower Man. Not interested in that. T2 Arcade, really? That was an SNES game. I love the arcade game. I remember feeling like quite a badass firing that machine gun. But maybe this was with the, you could play this with the Super Scope, which would have been pretty cool. Lester, yeah. Super Star Wars. Very difficult games. You know, back before Disney destroyed Star Wars. And it was still something special. Lufia. This was, I remember looking at screenshots of Lufia. I mean, just it's hard to see here, but the sprite work. Just big, bold, colorful RPG. Like to get my hands on that. I think I have it for a handheld. Oh, I love this ad. Look at this. This is one of my favorite magazine ads. Secret of Mana. Just the tree. Brings me back. Didn't have the SNES though to play it when it came out. I had to wait quite a bit of time, but it was still worth it. And Illusion of Gaia, another one. Another game that I only played much later and didn't get all that far in it. But, you know, this is something, if I had the time, the problem, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but the problem I have with RPGs today is I just don't have time to sit there and grind and move through them. With the exception of Persona 5 and Bravely Default, those are really the only recent JRPGs that I've played through. I feel bad about it because it was my favorite genre for such a long time. But, like Ninja Warriors. You know, the Happy Console Gamer likes Ninja Warriors. I probably played it in the arcade once or twice, but again, look at this, the vertical layouts. These are beautiful. So I bump the camera all over the place. R-Type 3. Yeah, I picked this up. Did they do a re-release of this on the PS Vita? I recall picking up an R-Type on the PS Vita. And it was still friggin' hard. For all these years. Ranma 1/2. Interesting. Interesting import. Never actually seen Ranma 1/2. Oh, this is a blast from the past in the sense that, you know, Joe Montana for the Chiefs. Now, I had this game. I want to say that I got... Yeah, I had the Tecmo Super Bowl. The one which I thought that was supposed to be Troy Aikman, but number 10 anyway. But yeah, that was a big deal when he was traded. And again, this was a very, you know, talking about competition to Madden. This didn't play as well as Madden, but this felt like a very realistic game. Let's see. And Quarterback Club. FIFA Soccer. Pro Move Soccer. Tecmo Super Basketball. I want to say I played this recently. And, you know, Tecmo, I think they had hockey, they had basketball, they had football. I don't know that they did a baseball game, but none of their other sports games, in my opinion, could live up to Tecmo Super Bowl. Greatest Heavyweights. Now, this was a game that I liked quite a bit. on the Genesis. I remember talking this game up at school, and this kid, I was telling him this is one of the best sports games. I mean, look at the graphics, and I think you could even create fighters and take them through careers. I mean, it was a fairly one-dimensional game when you got into the ring, but I always had a lot of fun with this. I used to play this with another friend, and we used to do the training, go through tournaments, create the blue guy here. It was fun. So I convinced this kid at school to pick this up, and he was so disappointed with it. He was very mad at me, but I still stand by. It was a good game. Bill Walsh College Football. I actually had this. I don't know if I got this in '94, but I definitely had a version of this anyway. And this was a good game. It was Madden with college teams. And it was funny, I moved 95, and I lent this game to a kid down the street, and he'd never returned it. And funny thing is, he and I are excellent friends. I'm actually going to see him next week. And he still feels bad that he stole my Bill Walsh College Football. But I forgive him. NHL hockey with cutscenes. Was the Genesis or the Sega CD version? Interesting. Coach's Corner. Look at that. Sports Illustrated. Football, the ring boxing. I remember I was always a fan of boxing games, although these games were pretty bad. And now the camera is glitching. I don't know if that's on. Yeah, so I apologize. I'm going to let me restart the camera. So I will not end the stream. You'll hear my voice, but let me just restart the camera here. Sorry about this. Just plugging that back in. Hopefully that solves the issue. Always something with this streaming. Tecmo Super Bowl. Now this was a classic. And, well, now I'm talking about Tecmo Super Bowl, and I'm not seeing the page turn. So maybe I do have to restart the stream, but this is pretty easy to do on YouTube, so let me... Well, that didn't work. So let me see if something I can do in properties. Well, just as I was about to get going here, it seems that maybe my camera is overheating. I don't know why this is doing this. Yeah. Well, as I've always said with streaming, whenever I do it, there is something wrong, and whenever there's nothing wrong, no one ever watches. So this was, getting into it. Had some viewers tonight. It was good, but always a technical snag. So I'm going to sign off for now, and thanks for watching.